Bellator MMA is always on the lookout for top UFC talent, where they have already signed top fighters to their roster. These include Ryan Bader, Gegard Mousasi, Lyoto Machida, Rory MacDonald and many more. With some UFC fighters not performing well, and with some fighters not happy with their contracts, there's a chance that more UFC fighters may jump to Bellator MMA sooner than later. So for this video I'll be talking about the 10 fighters who may sign with Bellator in 2019. Number 10. Paige Vanzant. Paige Vanzant has fought in the UFC for many years, where she has put some decent wins together over some top fighters. She has a well-rounded skill set where she is comfortable on the feet and on the ground. She has notable wins over Felice Herrig, Alex Chambers and Rachel Ostovich. Whilst in the UFC she has been able to put together some solid wins, but has struggled to move up in the rankings. Her most notable victory was when she knocked out Beck Rawlings with a switch kick and followed up with punches to get the victory at UFC on Fox 21. She mentioned in a recent interview that she is fighting out her contract to test how much she is worth. With her name and reputation, there is no doubt that Bellator will make an offer and she will most likely end up fighting in the promotion. Number 9. Nico Montana. Nico Montana is the Ultimate Fighter 26 winner and is the former UFC Women's Flyweight Champion after defeating Roxanne Modafferi by a unanimous decision in the finale. Her first title defense was scheduled to be against Valentina Shevchenko, who had just mauled Priscilla Cachoeira in a violent fashion at UFC Final 125. Both fighters were scheduled to face each other at UFC 228, but on the day of the weigh-ins, Nico Montana was transferred to the hospital due to her weight cut and was stripped of her title. She next made a bantamweight debut against Juliana Pena at UFC Final 155, where she would lose the fight by unanimous decision. Nico Montana came into the UFC with a lot of promise, but would get stripped of her title and would lose her next fight. She has had issues with the UFC stripping her of the title, where I feel she would be a perfect fit in the Bellator's flyweight division. She is a former UFC champion where Bellator may pick her up after her contract expires. Number 8. Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson has been a top featherweight contender for many years, where he was almost on the brink of a title shot, but has recently gone through a very rough patch. After putting 4 wins together over Hakran Diaz, Tatsuya Kawajiri, Du Hoi Choi and Artem Lobov, he was heading in the right direction of a title shot. He would next get matched up against Brian Ortega at UFC Final 123, where he would lose the fight by a guillotine choke in the second round. He would next lose to Frankie Edgar, Hinato Moicano and Shane Burgos, where he is currently on a 4-fight losing streak. He is next scheduled to face Kron Gracie, where if he loses again, he may be released from the UFC. With Cub Swanson's exciting fighting style, I believe his talent would suit Bellator's featherweight division best, where he will fit well with his skill set. I believe Bellator will pick him up immediately if he is released from the UFC. Number 7. Ben Rothwell. Ben Rothwell had been a top heavyweight contender for many years, but just a couple of years ago he looked like a legit threat for the title. He turned a new page where he had put together 4 devastating finishes over Brandon Vera, Alistair Overeem, Matt Mitrione and Josh Barnett. He would next face Junior Dos Santos in a title eliminator bout at UFC Final 86, where in the fight he would get dominated for all 5 rounds, losing the fight by a unanimous decision. He would next lose to Blagoy Ivanov at UFC Final 146 and last lost to Andrei Arlovsky at UFC on ESPN4. With 3 losses in a row, he may get released from the UFC if he loses his next fight to Stefan Struve at UFC on ESPN7. If he does end up leaving the UFC, I believe he will be picked up by Bellator, where he will be a great addition to the heavyweight division. Number 6. Tonya Evinger. Tonya Evinger is the former Invicta FC bantamweight champion who came with high expectations, where she failed to deliver since joining the promotion. In her UFC debut, she would receive an immediate title shot against Chris Cyborg for the featherweight title at UFC 214, where she would get beaten down, eventually losing by TKO in the 3rd round. She would next face Aspen Ladd at bantamweight at UFC 239 and would lose by TKO in the 1st round. She would next face Lena Landsberg at UFC Final 153, where she would lose by a unanimous decision. With 3 losses in a row, it seems like she will be released if she doesn't win her next fight. She is the former Invicta FC bantamweight champion and is a recognizable name, where Bellator may pick her up if she is released. Number 5. Renan Barão. Renan Barão is a former UFC bantamweight champion who burst into the UFC, finishing fighters in a spectacular way, which led him to winning the UFC bantamweight title. In his second title defense, he would face TJ Dillashaw at UFC 173, where he would absolutely get dominated and eventually finished by TKO in the 5th round, losing his title. Since losing his belt, he has never looked the same. The confidence he once had was no more, and right now he is currently on a 4-fight losing streak. Things are not looking good for Renan Barão, where it seems like he will be given his walking papers if he doesn't win his next fight. With Renan Barão being a former UFC champion and having a recognizable name, I believe he will easily be picked up by Bellator if he is released by the UFC. Number 4. Gilbert Melendez. Gilbert Melendez is the former Strikeforce lightweight champion who has struggled to put together a winning streak. In his UFC debut, he was given an immediate title shot against then UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson at UFC on Fox 7, where he would lose the fight by split decision. He would next defeat Diego Sanchez by unanimous decision and was given another title shot against new champion Anthony Pettis at UFC 181. In the fight, he would get submitted by a guillotine choke in the second round. He is currently on a 5-fight losing streak and has a UFC record of 1 win and 6 losses. He has had a very terrible run in the UFC, and it's looking like it's coming to an end. With his name value and his previous relationship with Scott Coker, I believe he'll end up fighting for Bellator as soon as he is released from the UFC. Number 3. BJ Penn. BJ Penn is a former UFC welterweight and lightweight champion who has slowed down quite significantly over the years, where he hasn't won a fight since his knockout win over Matt Hughes at UFC 123 in 2010. He is currently on a 7-fight losing streak, where he has completely been outclassed by his opponents. At the age of 40, he has struggled against younger guys, where it's difficult to see him remaining in the UFC for much longer. The UFC president Dana White said that his next fight will be his last, and he will not let him continue to fight in the UFC. With Bellator's history of signing fighters such as Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie, who were well past their prime, I believe BJ Penn will end up in Bellator due to his name value, where he can definitely bring attention to the promotion. Number 2. Kat Zingano. Kat Zingano had been a big name in the women's bantamweight division for many years, where she had defeated some big name fighters in the promotion. She is currently the last person to defeat current champion Amanda Nunes by violently beating her down by TKO at UFC 178. She had even challenged for the title, where she would lose to then champion Ronda Rousey by an armbar at UFC 184. Since that fight, she had a very rough patch and couldn't get together a winning streak. After losing 3 fights in a row, she would break a losing streak by defeating Marion Renault via unanimous decision at UFC Final 133. She last faced Megan Anderson at UFC 232 in a featherweight bout, where she would lose by TKO in the first round due to an eye injury. After 7 fights under the UFC, she was abruptly released from the UFC. She is currently a free agent and could sign with any of the big MMA promotions across the world. I believe she will end up with Bellator due to her name value and would be a great addition to the featherweight roster. Number 1. Cris Cyborg. Cris Cyborg had been one of the most feared women on the planet due to her ferocious fighting style and her violent finishes. She had won numerous world titles in different organizations, where she had left her mark as one of the most scariest female fighters on the planet. She signed with the UFC in 2016, where she made quick work of Leslie Smith at UFC 198, finishing her by TKO in the first round. She would next demolish Lena Landsberg at UFC Final 95 and next capture the UFC Women's Featherweight title, finishing Tonya Evinger by TKO at UFC 214. Now with Cris Cyborg as the champion, she would successfully defend her title twice, defeating both Holly Holm and Yana Kunitskaya in a dominant fashion. Her next opponent was the women's bantamweight champion Amanda Nunes, who would step up and challenge her at UFC 232. In the fight, Cris Cyborg's aggression would backfire, where she would get flatlined in just 51 seconds of the first round, losing her title. She would next make a comeback against Felicia Spencer at UFC 240, where after 3 rounds she would get the unanimous decision win. She would next get into a dispute with Dana White, where things became sour and she refused to re-sign with the UFC. As of right now, she is a free agent and all signs are pointing towards a signing with Bellator. She had previously worked with Scott Coker and had a good relationship with him whilst fighting for Strikeforce. Cris Cyborg is still a big name and could bring in a lot of attention if she signs with Bellator. Here are my honourable mentions for the fighters who may sign with Bellator in 2019. Let me know your honourable mentions in the comment section below. Alexis Davis. Alexis Davis has been a top name in both the women's bantamweight and flyweight divisions, where she has racked up some solid wins in the UFC. She has victories over Liz Carmouche, Sarah Kaufman, Jessica Ai and Amanda Nunes in Strikeforce. She had a decent run at bantamweight, where after racking up 3 wins, she challenged then champion Ronda Rousey at UFC 175, but would lose by KO in just 16 seconds. She dropped down to the flyweight division, where as of right now, she is on a 3-fight losing streak. I believe Bellator would likely pick her up if she was released by the UFC, due to her having a recognizable name and her previous history with Strikeforce. Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson was given an opportunity in the UFC with a 0-0 record after Mickey Gall was signed to the promotion. Both fighters were booked to face each other at UFC Final 82, where Mike Jackson would be submitted by a rear naked choke in just 45 seconds. Mickey Gall would go on to defeat CM Punk at UFC 203 via a rear naked choke. A 3-round welterweight bout between Mike Jackson and CM Punk was booked to open the main card for UFC 225. After a lackluster fight, the unanimous decision was given to Mike Jackson, who was then immediately released from the promotion due to his performance. He has built up some negative heat from his win over the former professional wrestler, where Bellator may be a good option for him to continue his MMA career. thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we post videos. So that was my list of the 10 fighters who may sign with Bellator. Let me know your honorable mentions in the comment section below. Also check out my last list video where I talk about the 10 cardio freaks in the UFC 2019 and my other list video where I talk about the 10 granite chins in the UFC 2019. I appreciate your support as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.